Okay, that's enough of that. Looks like the stream is good. Hi, I'm the Expert Layman, and this is Grinding Meaning number 27. Pathetic Men and Female Mate Selection. Last night I saw something I wouldn't have found believable if it were a character in a movie. If you notice the thumbnail, that would be Bradley, the business hippie from Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. And to be honest, he was set up to be an incredibly pathetic character. But even after his apparent strip search at the police station, Bradley is a pillar of dignity compared to the display that I saw last night. I'd gotten through a Tarzan run. Oh, I'm also going to be doing lockpicking, skilling up my lockpicking, which is fairly simple and straightforward. It won't require a whole lot of my attention. But finished up the raid, which, it was so much fun. I'm having so much fun with my Warlock. I actually died during night bane, got a battle res, and climbed my way back up and took top damage. Locks are pretty powerful. But after the raid was over, went outside to have a smoke, and caught an exchange between two people that apparently used to be a couple. And as has happened a few times, my initial take... Let's turn this down. Ended up getting reversed as I observed longer. And it was basically a woman done with a guy dropping his crap off so she never has to, like, deal with him again. And in this case, the guy was so utterly pathetic. Literally whimpering, wailing, and weeping. Like, it was really hard for me to believe that it was actually happening. What I'd pieced together, because this is about, I don't know, 50, 75 feet away, was that he had basically cheated on her with someone she knew. And she had apparently called him up and said, I took all your stuff you have at my place, I threw it in the bed of my truck, and you can come out and get it, or I will drop the gate and drive away and you can pick it up off the road. And and he wasn't like trying to say, no, I didn't do it, or no, we need to try to make this work, or I'm sorry, or anything like that. His entire concern, the only thing that he would address was that like she wasn't nice to his stuff. It wasn't a complaint that she'd actually broken anything. It's just like, you just threw it back there. And she's like saying, I told you to stay away from her, and you said you would, and then find out you've been texting him for like weeks. Been texting him for like weeks, and then when I was out of town, like, I'm done with you. And then you hooked up with her, and it's like, she's just like, I'm done. Just take your shit and go. And he's like dragging it out, and literally like whimpering, taking like very few things each trip in. And this was in the evening, so I didn't see a whole lot. But the guy literally looked like Bradley, the business hippie from... Right? There we go. From Harold and Kumar. And as I said before, Bradley was like a pillar of dignity compared to this guy. And at first I thought, oh, great, the guy has triggered a crazy bitch and she's over here doing crazy stuff. But she was actually being reasonable. She's like addressing the reasons why she's done with him. And he refused to acknowledge any of it. Like, all he would talk about was like that she hadn't treated his stuff nicely, and just whimpering and wailing about it. And I had this really weird feeling inside of me, something that really doesn't come up very often. And it's something like, this guy really needs his ass kicked. And it's not just like, oh, you know, weakness must smash. It's kind of like he has apparently not received a number of corrections that he seriously needed throughout his life. Actually, let me take that thing down so I can see my buffs. Somehow he made it to this age, and he's seriously demonstrating toddler behavior. Except most toddlers I've known are more mature than this. Oh, and also playing on the gamepad, which is pretty much how I do all my playing now, other than, you know, clerical stuff and interacting with quest givers and auction house and mailing stuff and things like that. And it's like, he apparently has gotten through life, like, behaving like this, somehow. Which is just, it's really sad. Like, this is his way of coping with having done something really shitty, is to just completely ignore the fact, like, 'cause I would have to imagine that if he didn't do it, he'd be saying he didn't do it. Or making excuses for why he did. Or maybe trying to accuse her of cheating also, or something, you know, something along those lines. But his entire concern was with his, like, how the disrespect with which his property was treated when she was bringing it over. Which it seemed like it should be, like, one of the last things on the list of what you'd be concerned about in that situation. But a lot of times you'll notice people who just don't have, like, they are so in the wrong that they just won't even address, even in the most minimal degree, that, and they'll just pick out something else, excuse me, and only talk about that other thing, which is typically irrelevant. It's like they're faking their side of the interaction. But this also comes to, like, and she seemed like, and I've never been within, like, 50 feet of either of these people, because, you know, they're, like, across the street and, like, one house down. But she's attractive, and she speaks fairly clearly. And even when she was, you know, basically yelling at him and stuff, she was, like, she was going down a list of points, like, hey, you know, this is my problem, and this is why we're not together anymore, and why you need to get your crap out of the back of my truck. And... like, and it made me wonder, like, how... and maybe the guy, you know, when he isn't a blubbering mass of, I don't know, adult toddler that somehow missed the ass kickings that he would have needed to get to a better place. Like, how did she end up with him? And I can't obviously know this is the case because I know very little about their situation. But there is this trend of... after having bad experiences, some women will go for the strategy of picking a guy that they can control. Like, basically choosing a weaker man than they would typically... oh boy. Decide to date, just because, you know, a loss of control is very scary. But the big problem with picking a guy that you can control is they can also be controlled by other people. Which was almost certainly the woman that hooked up with him. Jesus, boy, that got extra run. It almost certainly wasn't about him. It was about this other woman, basically. This was more or less between the two women, and she was just showing that she could do it. Female hierarchical competition or aggression, it's mostly about attacking the other person's relationships, or, you know, character assassination, things like this. So he was basically her puppet but he was so weak that he was easily puppeted by somebody else. Obviously, I'm speculating, but I am speaking about a general trend that I see. And like I put in the notes, you know, undeveloped men and women with unrealistic expectations is like, it seems to be the trend where things are going now. Where guys just aren't developing properly, and women have had their expectations raised at the same point that the quality of the male is dropping, and it's not good. It's not good for anybody. But social media is so damaging to women, and like the school environment and basically society in general is like really bad for male development, because they got to have their conflicts. They got to learn how to resolve their conflicts on their own, and it's like that is just something completely frowned upon. Like, it's guys, in order to like get a really good feel for like someone, you almost have to get into a conflict, and it's like it's practically a trope in movies and stuff, or, you know, especially like anime, where, you know, you have your fight and then like your allies, and there's a reason for that, because if you don't want an ally that's weak. So if you get into a conflict with them and they show that they will stand up for themselves, that means that, you know, they'll also stand up, be able to stand up for you in the event of a conflict. I'm expressing this very well. But denying young men, you know, their conflicts, their schoolyard fights, you know, you have to go through a lot of discomfort if you're going to reach something called an adult male. And fewer and fewer are actually getting there. And then the poor women have, like, basically garbage to pick from. But at the same time, you know, and although it's changing a bit now, they've been filled with these expectations of what they should expect from a guy, which are also would have been unrealistic even when most men were developing, or at least a lot more of them were developing properly. I don't know. I don't mean to be like pessimistic. I'm not sure. Well, there's a thing I should have mentioned at the beginning, and I almost did a stream on it on its own. And there's this term that was used, like the separation of like religion, science and religion, called like non-overlapping magisteria. Like one deals with what is, and one deals with, you know, the meaning of what is. And when people talk about things, they'll say, okay, here's the situation and here's what needs to be done. And it's not like there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I'm just so much more interested in what is, and I tend to skip the what should be because it's a lot less interesting to me. But almost everybody, if what they're describing of what is in service to what they think should be. In the same way, what someone believes will tend to be plastic to what they would like to be true. There are either I'm not seeing them, or there are just not that many on this level. So I guess that was the main thing I want to talk about. Just this, I just could not believe a guy could make it to adulthood like that. Like that, and that's like, to still be using the coping strategy for getting caught doing something bad and punished when you're like 4 years old, and that's like still your go-to strategy as a freaking adult in your 20s. God, that's just so sad. I did also, I don't know, wasn't really thinking about doing a stream on this, but it seems like nobody is actually looking out for the actual... Basically, women are really getting screwed right now, and I find myself in a really, really weird position because there don't seem to be any effective advocates for them right now. Those pretending to advocate for women are really just advocating for themselves and don't actually give a crap about other women or women in general. And those that are actually female advocates are being branded with a pejorative and basically drummed off social media. And as I said, it puts me in this weird position of like, there was a time if I were the kind of person to apply self-labels, I might have called myself an anti-feminist. And now I feel like, well, we gotta have balance. You can't have like a whole group of people that are just getting like basically screwed over without anybody like looking after their interests. And I am definitely not volunteering to be that guy. I just find it really strange that nobody's telling women what they need to hear, and nobody's talking about what it seems like. It almost seems like an organized assault on what it is to be a woman. Like the category itself. There seems to be an effort to destroy the category itself. And I don't want to get into I don't do current issue, current events, public figures or politics. But a category exists, talking about like women, a category exists by exclusion. And that's any category. If it doesn't exclude anything, it's completely useless and essentially destroyed. And if there's no exclusivity to being a woman, you have, in a very real way, destroyed it. And no, very, very few, I'm not going to say no, and I'm obviously not going to name any individuals that are still carrying on the fight. But it's very strange. Should have thought about this more before I did it. I think 175. I can go someplace else now. I did not notice the color. Ooh, I watched the stream. Let's see what color that box was. That's too late. I missed it. I should just keep going though. And there's another different... I've thought about... It's been a couple months that I did one of these, so I've had a lot of thoughts percolating. And a lot of it has to do with, I guess, women. And how oblivious guys are to what it is they have to go through. Because in studying unconscious aggression in gaming, one of the things that just keeps coming up over and over again is that... how do you put this? Aggression hides in someone... Oh, I had a great phrase for this. Well, there's this saying that don't attribute to malevolence what can be more easily explained by incompetence. And I'm here to say that is not right. Because people will essentially pretend, mostly for their own benefit, that they are more incompetent than they actually are, as a way to express aggression on others. There's an old Bill Burr does a thing, a comedy thing on this, where this woman got like super mad at him because he loaded the dishwasher, but he didn't start. He's like, "What do you think I did? Got all the dishes in there, and I was about to hit the start button. I said, no, fuck her." Like, I'm saying, yeah, that's the way aggression manifests. Because, like, if he knew that was, you know, if he understood that that was going to upset her, he could very easily have just forgotten to do it. But it's this thing I'm calling there's deliberate conscious actions and deliberate unconscious actions. Things that people do or fail to do, in Bill Burr's case, that it is deliberate, but they hide this from themselves. And this explains a whole lot of why women will get very, very mad at their man. And the guy's like, dude, I just forgot. Why, you know, am I supposed to be perfect? It's like, they're like, well, how could you forget that? That seems like such a simple thing. And I think it's because women have this stronger, in the elephant and rider model, where, you know, the elephant is our kind of intellectual, you know, self-aware side. I mean, the rider is the intellectual, you know, self-aware, narrative generating side, and the elephant is more of our unconscious, more primal, emotional side. It's my opinion that in the male, the rider is a little bit smarter when it comes to negotiating with physical reality, but the woman's elephant, as it pertains to social reality, is way smarter. I mean, essentially in a balance, but they will feel things because they have a greater attunement to how social reality works. And essentially why... because there was this scenario recently in World of Warcraft. And if I hadn't spent, you know, several thousand hours in Rocket League studying toxicity and the way it manifests, because it always manifests just outside, just in the ambiguous area where it might have been an accident or might not have been, but, you know, people vary widely, so there'll always be people that are considerably more overt than others, and once you establish a spectrum, you can start noticing that the more subtle versions. And I had, you know, diagnostic criteria for this. It wasn't like I was guessing. I mean, I could predict how someone was going to play the rest of the game from the first few seconds of the game, even. You know, just how they approached the kickoff would tell you a lot about how they were going to conduct themselves in that game. And this is separate from actual skill. And a lot of it, you know, and the distinction between self-sabotage and team sabotage is a little... That's a rider distinction. It's not so much an elephant distinction, if that makes any sense. So, this is a person I'd run with a couple of other times, and there's some people where when they're around, things just seem to go sideways way more often than they should. And it's always, you know, like ambiguous, like, you know, that, you know, like, you know, there could have been an accident, or, oh, hey, they just screwed up or whatever. But if you kind of look at the totality of your interactions with that person, it's like, boy, things seem to go sideways a lot. And it also seems to be that I'm the one getting screwed, like, all the time. So I was kind of, this person was kind of already on my radar as far as being an aggressive person who hides their aggression in selective incompetence. So I was asked, hey, I just need to get to, like, what is it, like the second boss in Heroic Ramparts. And they were going to try to 3-man. It's like, well, that'll take a while, but, you know, I like doing weird challenges and stuff. And I don't know, I thought it might be interesting because with fewer people, it's easier to isolate certain behaviors. That's why I spent so much time playing 2s rather than 3s in Rocket League. It was easier to isolate the behaviors that I was interested in studying. So I said, sure. And on the first poll, and now this is a person who will, occasionally generate, as they tank, will occasionally generate a lot of threat, and you don't have to be terribly careful in holding back your damage. And I also brought in a character that isn't a super high damage character because I knew about this. And this is my priest. My smite priest. God, it's so much fun. So I gave probably at least 6 seconds in total. You know, at least 3 globals once they got the mob in place, and then I started casting my smites. And with the way the tiny threat meter that I use works, it doesn't tell you the threat that other people have on a target until you're on its aggro table. So I was, you know, by the time it updated and showed that I was like even with the tank with that first smite, which is virtually impossible if they're using any threat generating abilities, I couldn't interrupt my second cast, and I pulled aggro and it ran to me, and the tank chased it to me and then just stood there. You know, I faded, but it wasn't enough. And then I bubbled, but all that did was keep it from being a one-shot. And while it was between that first swing and the second swing, the tank just stood there not taunting and just watching it kill me. Like, okay, that's pretty sus. Come back in the second time, and I give it like 10 seconds, and instead of casting a smite, I want to see how much threat they've got on that on the mob, because it's a single pull. It's just one mob. And so I wand. And they've only got like 1,200, maybe 1,500 threat on the mob after like 10 seconds. And it's like, they're just auto-attacking. They're not using any of their threat-generating abilities. So I just keep wanding. And then I'm just wanding, and I am gaining on threat as I'm wanding. And I'm like, well, there is no way you accidentally forget to use any of your threat-generating abilities. And they're moving around a little bit, you know, like some lateral moves, which tanks do, and I don't know why. So the person's not AFK, and their rage has like filled all the way up and isn't dropping at any point. So they're literally standing there just auto-attacking, waiting for me to cast a normal damage ability so they can watch me die. So I decided to keep wanding. And it's like, okay, let's see how this plays out. And as I'm gaining, I think the tank realized that, oh, well, I'm going to look really stupid if I get pulled off of with a wand. And suddenly I see the rage, rage being consumed, and the threat jumps up like crazy. And it's like, oh, wow, so you can use your threat-generating abilities. But, okay, and here's the amazing part. That person might have no idea that they're being toxic. It's entirely possible that were able to craft some kind of narrative where, oh, and none of this came up in chat, but, people get really good at lying to themselves, and that's why clearly overt attempts to make other people miserable, even if you like put them in a chair, tied them up and put a light on them, like they would claim to be completely ignorant of any malevolent intent, and they'd be essentially honest because they've just gotten so good at deluding themselves. So this is why when you didn't start the dishwasher and your girlfriend's pissed off at you, she might be right. That seems like a good spot to end it. I'm the Expert Layman. You all have a great day.